Let's see. Do I need to mute myself?
You can, and then just unmute whenever you want to talk. That will be great.
Okay.
So welcome to everyone. Shabbat Shalom. We are in this week's portion is called Beishalach. And it is in Exodus chapter 13, verse 17, and goes through Exodus. What was that?
I said, well, thanks a lot, Lisa. You said, I'm sorry, I'm being funny.
What was that? No, go ahead.
I'm just being funny.
Okay. So Beishalach, Andy sent is in Exodus chapter 13, verse 17, and we're going to go through chapter 17, verse 16. And you know, the Haftorah portion that goes along with it's in Judges chapter 5, but we won't really be covering that. So this week's portion begins after the death of the firstborn of Egypt, and it's called Beishalach, which comes from the first verse in this portion, and it discusses the children of Israel being sent out from Pharaoh and Egypt and crossing the Red Sea. It talks about the bitter waters at Marah, the provision of manna, the water from the rock, and the battle with Amalek. And, like I said, this called Beishalach, which is often translated, and you let go, but it actually comes from shalach, which means sent or sent out. So let's go to Exodus chapter 13. And we're going to start in verse 17. And it begins, after Pharaoh had let the people go, God did not guide them to the highway that goes to the land of the Philistine, because it was close by. God thought that the people, upon seeing war, might change their minds and return to Egypt. Okay, so I want to stop right here because, like I said, it starts with Beishalach. And, like I said, this means to send away. And not only does it mean to send away or to shoot forth, but it also means to cast out or dismiss or to be divorced. And the bait at the beginning of it means in. So it's really in his sending out, talking about in Pharaoh sending out. And when we look at how it's spelled, it is spelled bait, shin, lamed, het. And bait is the number 2. Shin is the number 300. And lamed is 30. And het is 8. So in this word Beishalach, its numerical value is 340. And actually, this has a link with another verse in the book of Isaiah. So I want to go to Isaiah chapter 11 a minute. And I want to show you the connection here. Isaiah chapter 11, verse 1. Okay, Isaiah 11, verse 1. Says, but a branch will emerge from the trunk of Yeshai, and a shoot will grow from its roots. And, here the Hebrew word for branch is actually the word netzer. And netzer is spelled nun, zadi, resh, which nun is the number 50, zadi is 90, and resh is 200. So netzer, this branch, is the same value as Beishalach, is sending out. And so netzer is not only a branch, but it's something that you think about a branch. It's something that's sending forth from the root of the tree. And not only is, when we think about netzer, we think about, the vowels, the E there. But in Hebrew, of course, on a Torah scroll, you don't have those vowel pointings. So the root is also natzar, which means to guard or to watch. And when you think about the connection here, these first believers were called Netzarim. When we see the first believers referred to in scripture, they were called the Netzarim. They were the branches that are coming forth out of this root. And we know. No, we're talking about like it calls them the kahal in the desert, the congregation in the desert. Yeah, but when we talk about with Yeshua, where the first, the believers there was in the desert. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So they were out in the desert. So these first believers were called Netzarim. And so when you think about the connection here, that in this portion is called Beishalach, which is, Yah is having Pharaoh send them forth. And just as Yah is sending the children of Israel forth as like branches, as his netzer, he is guarding us during that time, which is exactly what he does to the children of Israel as he sends them forth. So, as Pharaoh is sending out, really think about who he's sending out. He's sending out the children of Israel, which we know. What are they going to do in the desert? They're going to go to Mount Sinai where they receive the word. They're going to become the bride. And so Pharaoh is literally sending out the bride. And so, within this verse, we've got Yah is really causing Pharaoh to send out the children of Israel or their bride out of Egypt so they could do what? So they could observe and keep the covenant. And, when we think about, going over the, what we think about the Exodus and leaving Egypt, both Pharaoh and the Egyptians, as well as the children of Israel, experience the Exodus. They both experienced it. And two people can really experience the same situation, the same, what's like a phenomenon, a miracle here, and look at it differently. For one, the children of Israel, it ended up being something good for a pleasure. But for the children of Egypt, it ended up being something bad for them. It was a plague. And if you think about, the Egyptians, made their life hard or bitter, and Pharaoh was very bitter. And so when you think about when we become embittered, then everything around us can seem very bitter. And there's actually two other words that are related to this. They're both spelled, they both have the same letters, but they're spelled differently. For those who've been in the way of the, I guess Torah or whatever, probably are familiar with the word oneg, the oneg, that you have after the Shabbat, we think of as a meal. Oneg is like the meal, and it's, literally means a pleasure. And oneg is spelled ayin nun gimel. Okay. So ayin nun gimel, but using those same letters and just changing the order, we have nun gimel ayin, same letters, just a different order. We have the word negah, which is the word plague. So if you think about what I was saying here, you've got two groups of people, the Egyptians as well as the children of Israel, both experiencing the Exodus, but one sees it as an oneg, as a pleasure, and the other sees it as a negah, a plague. And it all depends on our eyes, because what's the difference? One has the ayin at the beginning of the word, and the other one has the ayin at the end of the word. And ayin, remember, is the eye.
And they're just saying two different ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like when you look at a car wreck, two people can be in the same car wreck and have two different stories because they're experiencing, how they're experiencing, they're seeing it two different ways.
Yeah, even coming out, there's two experiences there.
Mm-hmm.
You see someone that's got is waiting and believing of the freedom of spirituality to worship their God. The others are only seeing the freedom of maybe going where they don't know where they're going and wishing they were back.
Yeah. Can y'all hear her, Debbie?
Probably, yeah.
You can. Okay. Yeah. Yes, they can hear.
You know, and then I'm thinking too, that goes within the future about, Yeshua, you know, God coming back for his bride. There's not gonna be that many. You look at the world today, there's not gonna be many as a bride today.
Yeah, it's how things are happening, how you look at how things are happening. And when things, you know, you think about when things in our life are not going easy or well, or, you know, we're, you know, just like the children of Israel, we're being chased by a Pharaoh. How do we look at the situation? Because do we believe that Yah is in control? If he's in control, then he's allowing us to go down this path.
You got to accept
So-
whatever's hidden, that's their
Right.
will.
And so it's your will. So what is he trying to show us through this? So and that's just looking at the word Bashalot. So let's go back to Exodus 13. And you know, I want to read that verse again and then keep going a little bit. It says, after Pharaoh had let the people go, God did not guide them by the way that goes through the land of the Plishtim because it was close by. God thought that the people, upon seeing war, might change their minds and return to Egypt. Rather, God led the people by a roundabout route through the desert by the Sea of Suf. And the people of Israel went up from the land of Egypt fully armed. Now, I want to stop right here a minute because I want to just show you this map, just so hopefully this will help a little bit. Okay, let me get right here. See if I don't need to do it this way. Might have to make it big first. So I want to show you this map because I think this helps understanding when you're seeing what's going on here. Okay. So can y'all see the map? If you want to come over here again, so you can see it too. Y'all see the map? Okay. So when we look at this map, I wanted you to see, okay, here's Egypt, there's the Nile River, and this is the delta where it branches off and makes like the fingers at the top that goes to the Mediterranean Sea. And actually, this is actually the area of Goshen. So that's the well-watered part where they had, you know, the Israelites were. Okay. Yeah, come here. I've got the map. Okay, so it's actually, you know, so this is the, you know, the picture. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. So that was the picture here. But you can see they were coming out, but I wanted to show you right here. They came out, they stopped at Sukkot first, and then they go across, and here is the place Etam, and that's where they're going to be. Okay, and then we see, if you think about the way of the Philistines, if you look right here, this is the area that's called the way of the Philistines. Okay, let me see if I can circle this. So this right here is the area that's the way of the Philistines. And notice what the scripture said. The scripture said that they, when they left, he didn't take them by the way of the Philistines, which would have been easier because look at where they're ultimately going. They're ultimately leaving Egypt and they're going over here. That's the shortest route. He didn't take them that way. He took them this way. And then right here, when they get to Etam, you would think that, okay, well, they're right here. They're going to just go up this direction. But again, they don't. They turn back down. Okay, so I wanted to show you that to give you just a little visual as we're going through. So hopefully that helps you see where things are.
Yeah, because while you're teaching, we can figure out.
Yeah, you can see your map. Yeah, it helps bring them. So it says that he led them in a roundabout way. Sometimes Yah, you know, think about it. Sometimes Yah leads us in a way because that seems confusing to us because it seems like, well, why didn't he just lead them straight up this way? If we needed to get from this point to that point, why didn't he just lead us straight there? Instead, he leads us across and then down and then back up. So why is he leading us all this way around, you know, when, you know, we should get to that one point, you know, instead of going from point A to point B? And, we need to trust Yah that he knows what's best. And sometimes, yeah.
When it comes to God and what he wants to do, we all gotta pray and somehow find that way. Because when God don't move, we want to move for him
Yeah.
and do it all.
Debbie, can you hear him without me having to repeat?
A little bit.
Okay, I'll repeat that then. He was just saying that we all seem to get in a hurry when we're dealing with Yah, and a lot of times we want to rush things, and Yah is not that way. He wants us to slow down and to really stand still. And two, we think about maybe Yah is bringing us that route because there are some lessons that we still need to learn before we get to point B. Is there?
People don't like change.
Yeah, we don't like change.
Change. Half of these people, God knows everything before we even think it. He knows what we're gonna think. So probably some of these people he already knew. So he said, I'm gonna take them out so they can learn.
Yeah. And maybe, we're needing to learn some lessons, whether it is to trust him more, whether it's, about how to obey him, or maybe it's getting rid of things in our life that hinder us from being in his presence, or maybe it's learning to strength in order to stand, when the test comes during those last days. So there's lots of things that we still need to learn and that we're learning on this journey until we get to point B. So, and one thing that really stuck out with me this year is that, we think about, a lot of times we think, oh, well, we're coming out of Egypt. We're coming out of Mitzrayim, and we're proud of the fact that we're no longer a part of Mitzrayim. But I started thinking about a passage in Ezekiel, and it really made me think about, remember who came out of Egypt. All of these who were coming out of Egypt here, they're going to the promised land, but they all came out, but they all don't go into the promised land. And, the passage I was thinking about in Ezekiel, let's go there a minute. In Ezekiel chapter 20, Ezekiel chapter 20. And I'm going to go to verse 33 is where I'm going to start. And it starts, as I live, says Yah Elohim, that I swear, surely with a mighty hand and with an outstretched arm and with poured out fury, I myself will be a king over you. I will bring you out from the peoples and gather you out of all the countries where you were scattered with a mighty hand, with a stretched out arm, and with a poured out fury. Well, we know this is a prophecy because we're looking at them being scattered amongst many countries, not just in Egypt here, okay? And he's talking about, so we always know that this is talking about a second regathering or a second Exodus. And then he says, and then I will bring you into the desert of the peoples and judge you face to face, just as I judged your ancestors in the desert of the land of Egypt. So I will judge you, says Yah Elohim. And I will make you pass under the crook, and I will bring you into the obligations of the covenant. I will rid you of the rebels who are in revolt against me, and I will bring them out from the land where they are living, and they will not enter the land of Israel. Then you will know that I am Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. So, like I said, we know that this passage is talking about a future prophecy that hasn't been fully fulfilled yet, because, he's talking about gathering us out of the nations where we were scattered. But notice that we don't go directly when he's gathering us out and we're coming out of those. We don't directly go into the promised land. He says, I'm going to take you into the desert. And that Hebrew word for desert is midbar. And remember, midbar, that's the place where he speaks. That's the place where he spoke to Moshe. That's the place where he gives them the word, is in midbar. And then when we think about the midbar being the word for desert, it's a play on words, because the word to speak, where he says, he's going to be speaking, is medaber. So it has the same root there. And so, it's interesting to think about. This is what got me to thinking and made me remember that just because we're coming out, remember, we're coming out for a reason. We're coming out because there is a destination in mind, but not everybody that comes out makes it to that next destination. So, okay. Going back to Exodus and looking at that verse where it says in verse 17, where he led them. He wasn't going to lead them by the way of the Philistines, okay? And this word is naham, which is from the root nahah, which means to lead or to guide or to bring. And at part of that word, we've got the word Noach in it, nun het. And, this root implies that he's leading them along the right path, just like with Noah, to bring them blessing and rest. And Yah says he didn't lead them in this way of the Philistines. It's basically a blessing. He's not doing that. It's a blessing that he's leading them in this roundabout way. It's his mercy. He's treating them kindly and blessing them. He's protecting them from those things that are surrounding them, just like he did with Noah. Just like the world, what was going on in Noah's world, he was blessing Noah and protecting Noah's family from the things that were going on around them. And you remember, like, this is a shadow picture, because you remember in Matthew 24, it says, for in the days of Noah will the coming of the Mashiach be, the Son of Man. And so, think about, just like this, and he's talking about the second Exodus and him coming, bringing his people out, that it is going to be like that. He's going to do it, but he's going to protect us in the midst of whatever's going on around us. And it may seem like we're going a roundabout way, but it's his plan to do that. And that he's, going to protect us during those journeys. So, but in verse 18 in Exodus, where we're reading there in 13 and verse 18, it's got the word led in English again, but it's a different word in Hebrew. This time it is the word sabab, which, means to turn around, okay, or surround, or a circle, or change direction. And this one, it's used more as a metaphor of a person's mind turning, like their attention is focusing. And this is the whole purpose of the Exodus, because you've got to think about, they were slaves. They had this slave mentality in Egypt. And Yah is now wanting to turn their mindset around, that you've got to get out of that slave mentality. You've got to realize what life is like being free.
Well, too, working for Pharaoh and working as a individual group of little people together to survive, to go, is a lot different. And I guess that's what he's trying to realize, make them see you're working with each other now to go the way I want you to go.
Right. And they got to know how to,
as a whole.
Right. And to think about that they were worshiping other gods, and it was, your mindset was totally different.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we're given by those two words that's led in English, but two different Hebrew words, we're given two different meanings of the reason why he's taking them this way. And it says that he didn't lead them by the way of the Philistine. Okay. And that word way is the word derek. And derek not only means a path or the way of them, but it also means your spiritual walk. And so he's saying that when we look at this, that Yah is not leading the children of Israel in the way that the Plishtim or the Philistines lived. Okay. So think about it. Remember, Plishtim, that's where Palestinians get their names from, is the Plishtim. Okay. And so, and you also think about that he's saying, I'm not going to lead them in the way of how their manner of life was. Now, we know that Egypt, Mitzrayim, is a picture of the world. And the world looks at things, well, there's usually a shortcut. But with Yah, there's not a shortcut. You got to, do it his way. I want to show you something else here. And I'm going to pull this up right here because I just mentioned this about the Plishtim.
And you know, right at this point too, while you're doing that, what happened in Egypt with the plagues and things has not fully got around to a lot of people, you know. So
What do you mean not got around to a lot of people?
a lot of people know. I mean, after the flood, I mean, after the parting of the Red Sea, you remember, then everybody began to fear them because they knew what God had done for them.
Oh yeah,
See,
yeah. You're talking about people the people that were
Yeah.
living there during those times didn't necessarily.
The Philistines now, you know, he's taken away from them, you know, because of war and everything.
Yeah.
And they've probably not heard of all that's been going on in Egypt really that much, or couldn't believe what's been
Or
happening.
as much, yeah. Okay, so I wanted to share this with you because this is, I just went on Google Earth, okay, and this is just the map of, I'm gonna zoom out just a minute, okay, and you can see the yellow dots here, okay, Ashdod, Eshkelon, Aza, Rephidim, and this actually today is called Tel Asapi, which is, these are in scripture, the 5 cities of the Philistines. Okay. So I'm going to zoom it out a little bit more. Notice where they are. Right here at Gaza. One of them is in Gaza. Okay. So when you think about here, I'm zooming out a little farther. There is the Nile Delta. There's the Nile River. Okay. So remember when they were coming out, the way of the Philistines would have been this area all right here, right around Gaza. Okay. And he's saying, I'm not taking them that way. Instead, they come down and they go over here. Okay. And so I just wanted to share that with you because that is in scripture when we start going through Samuel, when we start looking at those 5 Philistine cities that are mentioned, that's where they're located. This is where they were. And just so you can see that. And, you know, today we call that area the Gaza Strip. Now, what's interesting is look at verse 17 and 18 again. And I know we haven't gotten far, but I just wanted you to, there's so much here to even look at. There seems like a contradiction in these 2 verses. Because in Exodus 13 and 17, he says, I'm not going to lead them by that way. Why? Because they might see war and change their minds and go back to Egypt. Okay. So he's saying, I'm not going to lead them there because they might see war. But yet look at verse 18. Verse 18 says, well, wait a minute. Yeah, they came out and they're not going to go this roundabout way. And that the people of Israel went up from the land of Egypt fully armed for war. So it seems like they're contradicting each other, that y'all didn't want to lead them by the way of the Philistines because they might regret and want to, you know, when they see the war. And yet they left Egypt fully armed or prepared for war. And so it really wasn't, I don't think, about the war. And in the English, depending on which version you're reading, it says that they might regret. And in Hebrew, the word is birotam. And the root of birotam is nacham, which means to regret or to be sorry. And another meaning is to comfort, which seems opposite. And so it's, you know, he's saying that I don't want them to, you know, be sorry that they're having to go to war when they're coming out, you know, here. I don't want them, to, seems to be like they're going to be comforted now by being the war. It just seems like there's, a contradiction with them there because they're prepared for it, but yet he's like, no, they're not going to go that way. And then it seems like, okay, now we're going to get a shift in what we're talking about. Okay. Go to verse 19. Moshe took the bones of Joseph with him, for Joseph had made the people of Israel swear an oath when he said that God will certainly remember you, and you are to carry my bones up with you away from here. And they traveled from Sukkot and set up in Etam by the edge of the desert. And Yah went ahead of them. Well, okay, yeah. And Yah went ahead of them in a column of cloud during the daytime to lead them on their way, and at night in a column of fire to give them light. Thus they could travel both day and night. And so, like now we went from, okay, them leaving. Now we're talking about Joseph's bones, because remember, Joseph had made them promise that when he died, that his bones would be taken. And with his last breath, he's saying, okay, here, you've got to bring back my bones. And he made his brothers swear that they would be taken with them. And, why was it so important that they took Joseph's bones? Really, think about, why is the bone so important that he would take them? And, I think about, well, what's in your bones, your DNA, it's representing your identity. And, I think that's part of the reason that not all of Israel was going to come out. All of the tribes were going to come out, but it was also that his identity would not be lost. Joseph's identity would not be lost.
Yeah, because in Egypt, they did away with everything. It had Joseph's name on it.
Yeah, they did away with it. Yeah.
The Pharaoh didn't know.
Yeah, she was just saying that, in Egypt after, that when the Pharaoh came along that did not know Joseph, that they started doing away with the things that were of, Joseph, that they did, remove those things. And we see that in history too, like even with Queen Hatshepsut, that they try to remove a lot of the images of her too. So in Egypt. Okay. Now remember that Yaakov made him promise the same thing. In Genesis 49 in verse 29, Yaakov, told them that, when he is going to die, that, make sure that you bring my bones back, and that that you bury me in the cave of Machpelah. In verse 32, he's actually telling them that. So he made him promise the same thing that Joseph did. And so when you think about Joseph's, when you look at this, when God comes and he visits you, Yaakov is saying that you're going to take my bones and you're going to bring them back to the land, and I'm going to bring you out and I'm going to redeem you. And Joseph says, when God redeems you, bring my bones back out of the land. And so, really think about who is redeemed was Israel. He's talking about Israel being redeemed there. And then this, when we think about bones, I always think about Ezekiel 37 with the dry bones. And Ezekiel 37, and I definitely will go there because that is just a great prophecy. Ezekiel 37. And verse 4 is where I'm going to start. It says, then he said to me, prophesy over these bones and say to them, dry bones, hear what Yah has to say. And to these bones, Yah Elohim says, I will make breath enter you and you will live. I will attach ligaments to you and make flesh grow upon you, cover you with skin and put breath in you and you will live, and you will know that I am Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. So I prophesied as ordered, and while I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound. It was the bones coming together, each bone to its proper place. And as I watched, ligaments grew on them, flesh appeared and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. And next he said to me, prophesy to the breath, prophesy human beings, say to the breath that Yah Elohim says, come from the four winds, breathe on these slain so that they can live. And so I prophesied as ordered, and the breath came into them, and they were alive, and they stood up on their feet, a huge army. And then he said to me, human being, these bones are the whole house of Israel. And they are saying, our bones have dried up, our hope is gone, and we are completely cut off. And I think that, this is part of the reason why Joseph is wanting his bones to be brought back, because he is part of the 12 tribes. When you think about the 12 tribes, if his bones were left in Egypt, then you wouldn't, he's showing that the whole house of Israel is coming out. And these bones must be connected together. They must be held together by a body. And you think about when we are redeemed and we're brought to be a people of Yah, we need to be a part of a body and need to be a part of a group.
Even just being a person by
Mhm.
yourself, if all your life, if you wasn't a believer or anything, there was always a hole there that was never filled, that always,
Right.
but when you came to know the Lord, but if you turn away, then you recognize something's missing from me again. It's because of,
Right.
Yeah.
And not only that, but then once you become a believer, is
Yeah.
still you need that body. You
Yeah.
need to be, and even in Ephesians 4:16, it says, under his control, the whole body is being fitted and held together by the support of every joint, with each part working to fulfill its function. This is how the body grows and the body builds itself up in love. And, therefore I say this, indeed, in our union with the Lord, I insist upon it. Do not live any longer as the pagans live. And so when we think about this, it's about, we need to remember not to forsake the gathering together or, being a part of a body, because we all need each other. All of us have a specific role or a function, and it may not be the exact same as the person sitting next to you, but we need to encourage each other and help each other. And the word bones in Hebrew is the word etzim. And at the root of that is the word etz, which is a tree. And so the word for bones and tree have the exact same root. And if you think about what we just read in the first part of Ezekiel here, this vision that Ezekiel's given is about these bones. But then if we go down to verse 15, we see that there's another vision that Ezekiel's given, and it's about these two sticks, and it's the whole house of Israel. And so Yah is basically showing Ezekiel the same thing in two different ways. Yeah, and one is talking about bones and one is talking about trees, but they both are the same. Okay. And he says, he's going to bring you to the land. Well, that's the same thing that Joseph was saying when to bring him to the land.
I teach it from Israel. I get my teaching every month, Bridges of Peace.
Right.
What I do for them.
Is it about trees? Yeah.
On the trees.
Yeah. She was just talking about that. One of the devotional teachings that she gets was about trees this month. So, and to think about too, that, Joseph's bones are, a picture of the house of Israel, the lost 10 tribes. And, this is just not, it's prophetic of the return, because, a lot of people read Ezekiel and say, oh, that's talking about Judah. That's talking about the Jews coming back. But there was more than the tribe of Judah. You remember, you have the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, Gad, Asher. Remember, the kingdom split. So you had the kingdom of Judah, which is the southern kingdom, but then the northern kingdom became the 10, what's called lost tribes. And, it's talking about all of them coming back together. The two tribes currently living in the land are basically Yehuda and Benjamin, but all of the 12 tribes are going to return to the land. And thus, we think about, we can make the assumption that, all of Israel is leaving Egypt. They're all leaving Egypt under the direction of Moshe, but they had to stop along the way and get Joseph's bones on their way out. So it wasn't just, oh, okay, we're going to go this way. We're going to go this way and we're going to stop here and get Joseph's bones. And then we're going to keep on the journey. And, so again, this is a picture of the house of Joseph, or, Ephraim, who is going to really join Moshe or Torah right at the end times. Because you think about how many people along didn't really, know, they thought Torah was done away with, and it's now we see that there are the whole group that have come to know the Torah here at the end. Now, another thing I found interesting talking about these bones was in the Jewish Encyclopedia. they sort of, I don't know, I say it's like mocking the tribe of Ephraim, because in the Jewish encyclopedia, and they get this from the rabbis' teachings in the Talmud, that they claim that when Ezekiel is giving this prophecy over these bones, that he's actually prophesying about the tribe of Ephraim, because this is what it says. It says, this is what they say in the Jewish encyclopedia. The tribe of Ephraim, talking about when they were in Egypt, miscalculated the time of the deliverance of the children of Israel from Egypt, and they left the country 30 years before the appointed time. And they were met by a hostile host of Philistines who offered them in battle, in which the Ephraimites lost 300,000 men. Their bones were strung in heaps along the roads. And according to the Sefer HaYashar, this event took place in the 180th year after the Israelites went to Egypt, when 30,000 infantry from the tribe of Ephraim left, and the battle was waged near Gath. That's the land of the Philistines near Gaza. Because they rebelled against the word of God, leaving Egypt before the end of their captivity destined by God had arrived, all except 10 were slain. And the Philistines lost in the battle 20,000 men only. And 10 men who escaped from the battle returned to Egypt and related to their brethren what had happened to them. Ephraim, who was still alive at that time, mourned them many days, and that the children of Israel might not see the bleached bones of their slain brothers of Ephraim, and return to Egypt. God led them to Canaan by a circumvent way. The slain Ephraimites were subsequently resuscitated by Ezekiel. And so what they're saying is that those bones that Ezekiel's talking about is the bones of the Ephraimites who actually tried to leave Egypt early and was slain because it wasn't time for them to leave, because Yah had already destined the amount of time that they were going to be in Egypt. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But
I heard that it was Israelites, army of them.
Yeah, but then when you
which was from the Ephraimites,
yeah,
and they were slain, and that was them.
Yeah, but then too, the question comes to be, when you look at Ezekiel's prophecy specifically says that this is the whole house of Israel.
Yeah,
and not just Ephraim. So I don't know, but that's something to think about. The rabbi said it in the Talmud. I don't know where they're getting that from, but that's just where.
Yeah, and that's where I feel
Yeah.
about something about those
Yeah.
characters with the
Yeah, well, I mean, they just, it's written in the Talmud, and of course they hold Talmud up like Torah. So, but like I said earlier, God brings us out of Egypt, or brings us out of something, but he's not only bringing us out of something, he's trying to bring us to something else. And I think we lose that. Oh, we're being brought out. Yeah, he's bringing them out so that they could worship it. Yeah. And so, we've got to remember that, not just being brought out, but you're being brought out to go somewhere. There is a destination. There is something else there.
Even though it might just be something the sages say or something, even about the soldier, it still sounds good, because to know that the Lord would save those bones to be
Resurrect. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to have a God like that, because no other God.
Yeah, would do that.
No.
Okay, Exodus chapter 14. And Yah said to Moshe, tell the people of Israel to turn around and to set up camp in front of Pi Haharot, between Migdal and the sea, in front of Baal Zephon, opposite it by the sea. And then Pharaoh said to the people of Israel, now look at what Pharaoh is saying. Pharaoh will say that the people of Israel are wandering aimlessly in the countryside. The desert has closed in on them. I will make Pharaoh so hard-hearted that he will pursue them. Thus I will win glory for myself at the expense of Pharaoh and all of his army. And the Egyptians will realize at last that I am Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. And the people did as ordered. And when the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his servants had a change of heart toward the people, and they said, what have we done letting Israel stop being our slaves? Because, you know, hey, it's free workforce now, they're gone. So he prepared his chariots and he took his people with him. He took 600 first quality chariots as well as other chariots in Egypt along with their commanders. And Yah made Pharaoh hard-hearted, and he pursued the children of Israel as they left boldly. Now I want to stop here for a minute and I want to go back to this picture that I showed you earlier. Okay, let me get right here just a second. Okay, so let me share my screen. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try it again. Share. And I'm going to share this one. Okay. So here was the picture that I showed you earlier of the map. You guys can see that? Can you see it? Dawn or Ken? One of the, somebody. Okay. So.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, thank you. So here, you know, like I said, we've got the way of the Philistines here. And then we've got them coming out. Okay.
Right.
And where they are going here. Let me get my marker. Sorry, it's on eraser. I've got to try to move this so I can get my marker. There we go. So they're going out, and he says, remember, he's taking them out. They stop here at Sukkot, and then they're at Etam. Okay, this is where we are right now, at Etam. And he says, well, wait a minute. They start going a roundabout way, and Pharaoh says, wait a minute, they're caught in the wilderness. They don't know where they are, because they should be going up here. But instead, they go the opposite direction. Okay. So they're looking like they're going now the opposite direction. And Yah says, you know, Pharaoh's going to say that you're going the wrong way here, that you're lost in the wilderness. Now I'm going to go to another Google Earth. Sorry, my nose. And I'm going to share this one. This again is just, I went on Google Earth and put in this. No, not that picture. I try that again. Okay, let's see. Okay, right here. Here we go. Okay. Can y'all see the Google Earth now?
No,
No. Is it coming up yet?
not yet.
Okay.
Now it is.
Now it is. Okay, now we got it. So this right here, let me zoom it out a little bit. Okay. Steve, you can orient yourself, okay? Okay. Let me zoom. Okay. Now I know you don't know where you are probably. This right here, you can come over here and look. This is the Nile River. Okay. Can y'all see my arrow?
Yes.
Okay, you can see that. So this is the Nile River. This is the Mediterranean Sea. This is the Nile Delta. This was Goshen. Okay. This was the area we were talking about them coming out, and they were coming over here. They stopped and got Joseph's bones, and then they went right over here. Okay. Down. This is Israel. This is where we have the Gaza Strip right down here. This is the Gaza Strip, the way of the Philistines. Okay. So now they're right here. I'm going to zoom in and show you. Okay. So right here, this is the Gulf of Aqaba. Okay. This is the Gulf of Aqaba. This is the arm of the Red Sea. Okay. And notice Etam is actually somewhere right in here. And when we look at where they're going, notice that instead of going back up toward Israel, they go this direction. What do you see right here? Mountains. What did Yah say that Pharaoh was going to say? They got lost in the mountains. And if you start going this way, there's actually a path that wanders through this area right through here. You see that little path that goes right there? I'm going to try to zoom in. Okay, it wanders through these mountains. Pharaoh's pursuing them, and then you get to this place right here, Nuweiba. Okay, that's jutting out. They're stuck. What's in front of them? The Red Sea. What's behind them? All of these mountains. There's only one way out of the mountains. Who's coming along this path? Pharaoh and the chariots. Okay, so think about what this is saying in the scripture and looking at the picture. Okay, and so hopefully it's making a little more sense, because he's saying, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart. Pharaoh's going to say that you lost your way. You're getting shut in this, you're lost in the wilderness here going through these mountains. And now here you are, you have no other way to go. But remember, Yah is the one that's leading them on this path. Okay. Now let's go to the next verse. Okay. I stopped in verse 8. Okay. Verse 9, Exodus 14:9. And the Egyptians went after them, and all of the horses and chariots of Pharaoh with his cavalry and army, and overtook them as they were encamped by the sea, that big area, by Pi Haharot in front of Baal Zephon. And as Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and saw the Egyptians right there coming after them. In great fear, the people of Israel cried out to Yah. So, think about, they're seeing them come along that path, and they're, crying out to Yah. Where else do we have to do? What else do we have? Because behind us is Pharaoh's army, which is basically going to kill us. In front of us is the sea, which we're going to die. So what are our choices? Well, we die or we die. And, but the whole purpose is Yah has a plan. He led them here. Now, like I said, that Nuweiba beach was that area, that big area I showed you there. I want to show you another picture, and this is a different picture of not only that beach, but I want to show you the sea here. Okay. So in this picture, come on, share. Okay. Okay. So this is a website. Okay. And this website is actually giving you the hydro. Okay. So if you go down on this website, all the information, which if you want to read all that, I want to just look at this map. Okay. And this is the map I wanted to show you. You guys can see the map. Okay. So here is the Red Sea coming in. The Gulf of Aqaba is on this side. We're right here. This is the blown up picture to the right of that. Okay. Now, if you notice, it is color coded, and it's color. If we look at the Aqaba here, the Gulf of Aqaba, we can see the different colors. Okay. And it's white area, which means it's not very deep. Look at your chart. Okay. And then, you got the different colors and different shades of blue. And then you've got, the deepest part here going up to 1,700 meters. But Nuweiba Beach that we were just looking at, where going through those mountains, here's all those mountains, opens up to right here. This is Nuweiba Beach. Now, if you notice, going directly across from that, look at your colors. It's white, very light blue, a little bit darker blue, and then goes back to the white. This is not the deepest part of the sea. The white, yeah. So if you look at it, remember what happens when they get here. Okay. This is where Yah tells, Moshe, you go step in it, and the waters are going to part. Look at what this is. This is not the deepest part of the water. So they can actually go when Yah parts the waters here. They don't have to go down a huge entrenchment.
Right.
It is the shallowest part of this whole area.
But it does have to be dry.
But it does have to be dry. You're right. So think about that. You know, Yah had this planned all along, which they had no other choice. Yes, when the water come back. Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. The waters, when he parts the waters, it is dry. They go across on dry land. So when you look at that, you can see what's happened here. Now go back to Exodus 14 and where we stop. Here, they were, afraid in verse 10, verse 11, and look at what they said. They said to Moshe, was it because there weren't enough graves in Egypt that you brought us to die out here in the desert? Why have you done this to us, bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we tell you in Egypt to let us alone and let us go on being slaves for the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to be the Egyptian slaves than to die here in the desert. And Moshe answered the people, stop being so fearful. Remain steady, and you will see how Yah is going to save you. And he will do it today. Today, as you've seen the Egyptians, you will never see them again. So think about what they're doing. They look and they still see the water right in front of them. They see death right in front of them. They see Pharaoh coming behind them. And they don't see Yah let them here. They see it as Moses led them here. And so they're coming against him, and this fear is causing them to speak against what Yah has planned for them. So their fear is causing them to basically speak against Yah. And they're actually crying out to Yah, but then they're also crying against Yah at the same time. And fear will cause us to hold on to things that were in our past that are oppressing us, like in Egypt, because we're afraid we don't know where Yah's taking us. And look at, verse 13. Look at what Moses says again. Don't fear. Stand still and look at what you're going to see. You're going to remain steady, and you will see how Yah is going to save you. That's the way the English reads it right here. But if you're looking at it in Hebrew, it's saying that stand still and you're going to see the salvation of Yah. What is salvation in Hebrew? Yeshua. So stand still and you're going to see the Yeshua Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. And he's going to show you today. And it's about having faith. Moses is telling them to stand still, and they're going to see Yeshua. They're going to see what he's capable of doing. And then if you look at verse 14,
Would they have known that?
would they have known? They wouldn't have known. They just would have known that the salvation, we don't, they equate the salvation with Mashiach. Yes. And then two, when we look at verse 14, look at what it says. Yah will do battle for you. Just calm yourselves down. He's telling them, you've got to keep yourself still here. Calm yourself down. And that word in Hebrew is harash. And it's interesting because harash means to be dumb or deaf.
Well,
or speechless.
You can pretty well say they're dumb because look at all the plagues that they just saw. And
but he wants them to be dumb. Don't say anything. You need to just have faith and be dumb. Don't be questioning him.
I mean, they got to see the fire of God.
Yeah, and they saw the fire and the cloud bringing them to that point, but yet they still saw it as this is Moses leading us out, not Yah. And here they brings them to the place.
They still associate as man.
As man, yeah. That Yah, his divine hand is doing this. And that here it seems there's no way for them. And when it seems like Yah, there's no way, you don't have any hope, Yah can make a way when there is no way. And that's what he does right here. And we know what happens, of course, I'm going to just keep reading in verse 15. And Yah asked Moshe, why are you crying to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Go into the water. He didn't back it up yet. Go into the water. Lift your staff, reach out your hand over the sea, and divide it into two.
Now he's telling Moses here.
Yeah,
to lift
you
it.
tell- yeah, he tell-
Not Aaron.
Yeah. And he says the
Now,
people,
sometimes it's Aaron.
yeah,
Sometimes
it's Moses here. Yeah.
You have to-
And the people of Israel will advance into the sea on dry ground. So he's telling them, you got to go into the water first. You got to go into it. You've got to have the faith to do that. And then he's going to dry it up. And as for me, I will make the Egyptians hard-hearted, and they will march in after them. Thus I will win the glory for myself at the expense of Pharaoh and all of his army, chariots and cavalry. And then the Egyptians will realize that I am Yadhe when I have won myself glory at the expense of Pharaoh, his chariots, and his cavalry. Next, the angel of Yah, who was going ahead of them of the camp of Israel, moved away and went behind them, and the column of cloud moved away in front of them and stood behind them. So now you've got both of these, this cloud of fire and the cloud behind them, between them and Pharaoh. So that way they could get a little head start. He's, basically moving the water here. Okay.
I mean, it just seemed like Pharaoh then when it turned around, once they saw that.
I mean, just think about literally, if you literally saw a cloud of fire in front of you, which you, hard-hearted. Yep.
And it was humongous.
Yeah, it was not, it wasn't, yeah, yeah. It was
humongous.
huge. Yep. And it stationed itself between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. Right there was the cloud and the darkness here, but light and light by night there, so that one could not come near the other all night long. And Moshe reached out his hand over the sea, and Yah caused the sea to go back before the strong east wind all night, and he made the sea become dry ground, and its water was divided into two. And the people of Israel went into the sea on dry ground with the water walled up on their right and on their left. And the Egyptians continued their pursuit, going after them into the sea, all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and cavalry. Just before dawn, Yah looked out upon the Egyptian army through the column of fire and cloud and threw them into a panic. Okay. And they caused their wheels of their chariot to break off so that they could move only with difficulty. And the Egyptians said, Yah is fighting for Israel against the Egyptians. Let us get away from them. And Yah said to Moshe, reach out your hand over the sea, and the water will return and cover the Egyptians with their chariots and cavalry. And Moshe reached out his hand over the sea, and by dawn the sea had returned to its former depth. And the Egyptians tried to flee, but Yah had swept them into the sea. And the water came back and covered all of the chariots and cavalry of Pharaoh's army who had followed them into the sea. Not a one of them was left. So, I mean, just think about how amazing that sight must have been. I mean, they were going through and,
Well, somebody said that God made a miracle so big that he drowned all of them in 2 inches of water.
yeah.
He could have done
He
it,
could have
but-
done it, yeah. But I mean, think about it, was probably more that. Yeah, it was definitely that. Okay, in verse 29, but the people of Israel walked on dry ground in the sea, and the water walled up on their right and on their left. And on that day, Yah saved Israel from the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the shore. And Israel saw the mighty deed that Yah had performed against the Egyptians, and the people feared Yah, and they believed Yah and his servant Moshe. And I mean, to think about, here, like I said, that the waters weren't this wasn't the deepest part, but it was enough to drown them. And remember, he threw them into a panic before this. And then the waters come crashing down. Well, and then it's starting to swirl. And you got to remember, just think about when you're letting the waters go at a dam, how they come flying in. I mean, if you're there, it's going to be flooding through.
You're at the ocean.
Mhm.
If you just walk in and say something, it's not overpowering.
Yeah, it's going to overpower. It's going to take, yeah.
You know what
What it could do. And then think about verse 31 here. He says, when Israel saw the mighty deed that Yah had performed against the Egyptians, the people feared Yah And they believed in Yah and in his servant Moshe. And that's how that verse was written in the complete. But in the King James it says, and Israel saw that the great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians, and the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moshe. So they believed both. They believed in Yah and they believed in Moshe. And so Israel basically was saved by this great hand of Yah here. Now, if we keep going,
there's a lot of about the hand. He wrote the hand in that, and then the hand it wrote many, many tickle on the wall. And there's a lot
and the right hand is always talking about the strength of Yah too. It's about what his powers are. Okay. Exodus chapter 15. And it says, then Moshe and the people of Israel sang this song to Yah. I will sing to Yah, for he is highly exalted. The horse and the rider he threw in the sea. Yah is my strength and my song, and he has become my salvation. This is my Elohim. I will glorify him, and my father's Elohim, and I will exalt him. And now this is called the Song of the Sea, Yom HaShirah. And what's interesting is we don't see it in English, but if you look at a Torah scroll, and I'm going to share this picture because this is a copy of a Torah scroll. Sorry, my mouse is not wanting to work and I'm having a hard time trying to get it to share. Try again. Keeps wanting to go participants. Sorry. I'll try one more time. See if it'll do it this time. There we go. Okay. So here, this is a Torah scroll. And if you notice the first two verses where it starts, and then you see how it's written. You notice how it's written on this side and then on this side, and it's alternating, and then you've got the passage in the middle.
Right.
This is supposed to be a picture of the wall of water, and the children of Israel going through the center. It's actually written in a Torah scroll to make it look like the water is on each side, and then the children of Israel in the center. So, and that's how this song is written in Exodus 15. And so it, like I said, it makes this homa, this wall on each side, and the children of Israel going through the mist. Now, what's interesting in verse 2 there, we read, this is the first time that we see Yah, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh's name shortened into just Yah, where it says that Yah is my strength and my song. It's actually not Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh there. It's just Yah, the shortened version of his name. Okay. And then verse 3, Yah, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is a warrior. Yah is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his army was hurled into the sea. His elite commanders were drowned in the sea of Suf. Sorry, you keep going. The deep waters covered them, and they sank to the depths like a stone. Your right hand, Yah, is sublimely powerful. Your right hand, Yah, shatters the foe. By your great majesty, you bring down your enemies. You send out your wrath to consume them like stubble. With the blast from your nostrils, the waters piled up, and the waters stood like a wall, and the depths of the sea became firm ground. And the enemy said, I will pursue and overtake them, divide the spoil, and gorge myself on them. I will draw my sword, and my hand will destroy them. But you blew your wind, and the sea covered them, and they sank like lead in the mighty waters. And, when you start going through this, Yah is actually used 45 times in scripture, and 45 is the numerical value of the word Adam, or man. And so Yah is trying to reveal himself to man through his word. And like I said too, that, even in, you were mentioning that the right hand is, they see that that's talking about the power and strength, but it's also linked with Yeshua. In verse, 6, we see that the right hand, we see the power and the strength there, and it's destroying the enemy. But in Psalms 18 and verse 35, and I'll just quickly go there, 18 and verse 35, it says, you give me your shield, which is salvation, and your right hand holds me up. Your humility makes me great. So in that verse, it is actually linking the shield and salvation with the right hand. And so, not only did, even in Judaism, they see that the salvation and the right hand being connected. Now, in Exodus 15, I read verse 9 about the enemy will pursue and overtake you. He's going to divide the spoil and gorge himself on you. I will draw my sword and my hand will destroy them. You blew your wind and the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Look at verse 11. Who is like you, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, among the mighty? Who is like you, sublime in holiness, awesome in praises, and working wonders? Now, in Hebrew, it's Mikamoka Belim Adonai, or Mikamoka Belim. They say Belim Adonai, but Belim Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Mikamoka Nedar Bekodesh Noara Telot Osei Pele. So when we look at this,
In church, they thought you speaking in tongues.
Eddie said if I was in church, they would think I was speaking in tongues here, which I am. I am speaking. I am different ones.
Another language, yeah.
But this is very important because Mika Mocha, that's a very important line. Not only in Judaism, it's become a song, but it's not only a song; it's an acclamation. And we don't really we miss a lot of it because not knowing the Hebrew. But Mika Mocha, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, when you write it out in Hebrew and you take the first letter of that, it actually spells Mem, Kaf, Beit, Yud. Maccabee. Maccabee. And according to tradition, thinking about Hanukkah, this was the battle cry of Yehuda, which Yehuda Maccabee. And that was the reason he was called Maccabee. Maccabee wasn't his last name. It was because his battle cry was Mika Mocha Baalim Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. So,
Wow, that's so cool.
and what was he doing? He was fighting against this enemy. Yeah, the Greek enemy. Yeah. Okay, verse 12. Exodus 15:12. You reached out with your right hand and the earth swallowed him up. Again, the salvation's being a picture here. And in your love, you led the people you redeemed, and in your strength, you guided them to your holy abode. And so think about, he's, again, guiding them by his right hand. Now, I want to stop here for a minute because, I do want to mention this morning, Eddie and I were looking at something on TV. We were actually watching the latest hostages being released. And in light of Trump's announcement about Gaza this week, and I, went back and after seeing the hostages being released and seeing how gaunt they looked, and it was very reminiscent of the Holocaust survivors, those that were coming out of the concentration camps. And I went back and I started looking at the study again, and I saw this next verse. And let's look at this. Okay. Verse 14. The peoples have heard and they tremble. Anguish takes hold of those living in Plishtit. Then the chiefs at Edom are dismayed. Trepidation seizes the whole heads of Moab, and all those living in Canaan are melted away. So think about what it's saying here. The nation's here and they're afraid, and anguish takes hold of the inhabitants of Plishtit, which is Philistines. the land of the Philistines. Okay.
Yeah, that-
Philistines, which is Gaza. Okay. So it's saying now here, wait a minute. Anguish is taking hold of the inhabitants of Gaza. Now let's keep your place there and let's go over to the prophet Zechariah. And Zechariah chapter 9. Zechariah chapter 9. Zechariah 9. And let's go down to verse 5. On seeing this, Ashkelon will be terrified. Gaza will too writhe in pain. Likewise, Ekron as her hopes are dashed. The king will vanish from Gaza, and Ashkelon will be without a people. Now, wait a second. What are all these places mentioned? We miss it. Remember at the beginning when I said I showed you the map of the way of the Philistines? Those cities? That was the Philistine cities. And look at what it says. It says, Gaza is going to writhe in pain, and her king is going to vanish. So the king of Gaza is going to lose its leadership, which is Gaza. It is going to lose its leadership. Isn't that what Trump was just saying? That, wait a minute. And not only that, but when we look at the rest of Zechariah 9 here, the downfall of Gaza is linked with Messiah's coming. Okay, keep going. Okay. Yeah, if you look at verse.
To be razzed, all of it down.
Okay, so look at verse. If you go down to in chapter 9, if we keep going down, I'm going to skip down a minute. Okay, go to verse. Well, go over to verse 9. Rejoice with all your heart, daughter of Zion. Shout out loud, daughter of Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and he is victorious, yet he is humble and riding on a donkey. Yes, a lowly donkey's colt. Okay, so this is talking about the Mashiach coming. And we know that not only do they have one application, but prophecies have multiple applications. So it's not just, that this happened, but yes, is it happening again? Okay, now go back to where I read verse 5, go back to verse 6. Notice else what it says. Not only is in verse 5 is Gaza going to lose its leader, but look at what it says in verse 6. And a mixed people are going to live in Ashdod, and I will destroy the pride of the Philistine. Okay. The Philistines. Okay. So when we look here, yep. So when you think about who is this mixed people that are going to inhabit this area, the Hebrew word for mixed people here is not the same mixed people that came out of Egypt.
It's the ones that's going to go back and
Okay.
rebuild.
So the mixed, okay, up, yeah. So the Hebrew word for mixed people here is not the same as the mixed people that came out of Egypt. This Hebrew word for mixed people here is mamzer. Sorry, mamzer. I have a hard time saying that. Mamzer, which literally translated is bastard. Okay, because it's okay. Okay, but what does that mean? It means that if they're a bastard, they're an illegitimate child. Okay, now wait a second. Could this mixed people actually be the United States, like Trump was saying? Because this illegitimate child is the child of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, which we tend to think of as Judaism. And what did they do? They mixed with the pagan nations and basically became, because Christianity incorporated all of this paganism into her, and became like a bastard child, this mamzer. Is this a picture of the United States? The so-called Christian nation has as its father Judaism, but has mixed so many pagan things into their culture. And is this showing us that that Yah is using Trump to bring about prophecy, whether you like him or not? Is he showing us in this portion that he's bringing about prophecy? Because, okay, I read verse 9.
What you've been reading is a prophecy, is what back then is what's happening
And now, yeah. Okay, now look, I read verse 9. Look at verse 10. It says, I will banish the chariots from Ephraim and war horses from Jerusalem, and the warrior's bow will be banished, and he will proclaim peace to the nations. He will rule sea to sea from the river to the ends of the earth. Also, by the blood of your covenant, I release prisoners from the cistern that has no water in it. So think about this. This is talking about Yeshua's coming. And I find it interesting that the phrase that they use here is this similar to the phrase that the pro-Palestinians use in reference to annihilating the Jewish people from the river to the sea.
Yeah.
Look what it says here. Yah will rule from the sea to the river.
Wow.
In addition to that, it says that in verse 11, I'm going to release your prisoners from a cistern that has no water in it. Okay, so these prisoners that are being held captive in cisterns that have no water in it. Well, what is a cistern that has no water in it?
It's drive the spirit, drive.
What is literally a cistern that has no water in it? A tunnel. A tunnel under the ground. But think about it. He's saying, I'm going to release those prisoners. What did we just, we're watching this morning about the prisoners being released, and still have so many that are there, and to me, I was just thinking, is Yah revealing that his plan is set in motion and that he's aligning those who are going to bring about his plan? And it never seems to amaze me that he aligns it with current events and what's happening in our parashah. And not only that, but the date that Trump actually made this announcement occurred on Tuesday, which on the Hebrew calendar would have been the 6th of Shabbat, and Shabbat is the 11th month. And so I just looked up this morning. I was like, okay, well, I'll look up in scripture and see how many scriptures do we have about the 11th month, because there's not really a lot about the 11th month. And I found 3 scriptures that was used 3 times in scriptures about the 11th month. Okay, so I'm going to give you these verses. First one is in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 3. Deuteronomy 1:3 says, on the first day of the 11th month of the 40th year, Moshe spoke to the children of Israel, reviewing everything Yah had ordered him to tell them. Okay, so that's the first time. The second one I saw was in 1 Chronicles chapter 27, verse 14. And this one says, the 11th commander for the 11th month was Benaniah from Piraton, from the descendants of Ephraim. And there were 24,000 divisions, 24,000 in his division. And this is talking about dividing up them for the army, the military. Okay. The third time I see the 11th month used in scripture is in Zechariah chapter 1 and verse 7. It says, on the 24th day of the 11th month, the month of Shabbat, in the second year of Daresh, the message from Yah came to Zechariah, the son of Beriyahu, the son of Edo, the prophet. So through these 3 occurrences that I saw of the month of Shabbat, we see what happening. Moshe is reviewing the importance of following Yah's commands. There is a military division of Ephraim, and the prophet is Zechariah. What did I just read in Zechariah? In chapter 9, we got the prophet of Zechariah. It's talking about, if I go to verse, Mashiach coming, but in verse 10, it says, I'm going to banish the chariots of Ephraim, which is the same one. The only other occurrence that we ever see the 11th month mentioned is about the military of Ephraim. and about doing Yah's will. And, so, where do, we see, where do we see the connection with Gaza is that we've got the prophet of Zechariah, we got the troops of Ephraim mentioned, and we also have Yah's emphasizing that in this time, we need to remember to do Yah's commands. Because why? He's about to return.
Yeah.
So,
I pulled up, I watched the Israeli guys, what I'm talking
yeah,
about.
the Israel guys, yeah.
Yeah. And they were talking yesterday, had an open discussion. There was like 4 of them there.
Yeah.
And they said, they were talking about the pros and cons of what Trump's doing. Like a lot of people in Israel was getting kind of iffy about Trump doing what he's doing.
Mhm.
But a lot of them says, okay. But one of the Israeli, Dave, I think is his name, he said, well, what they're talking about, most of them in Israel now and in Jerusalem, is what's going to happen after the 4 years when Trump's time ends.
Yeah.
What's going to happen to Israel and the U.S. right there? Because if he's bringing the U.S. in there and setting up, what's going to happen then?
Yeah, who's going to be in charge? Yeah.
Yeah, because everything's going to be, it's not going to be like Trump.
Yeah.
They're not going to be so pro-Israel like he has
Yeah.
been.
And that's the whole thing is to think about.
It's only 4 years.
And who's going to take it over? Because the question is, does that mean the UN or something?
Once all this is,
you don't know. You don't know. But
been cleared out.
But two, it does say that the bastard is going to be, the Mosmer is going to be the one that's going to come in, and they're going to be living in that land.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, is this all going to happen? And then after Trump, the 4 years is up, that's when the Antichrist.
No, I don't know, but that's what I'm saying. That's why the whole importance is to be on following his word, because like Eddie even said before, even in the Brit Hadashah, it says, if I hadn't shortened that day, well, what does that mean? If he's shortening the day, that means he's speeding things up. Is he speeding it up to where, people say, oh, well, all these things have to happen first. Well, what if he does it in a day? What if he does it, what I'm saying? And then you don't have time to process that this is all that's happened. So, okay, let's keep going. Exodus 15 and verse 22. Moshe led Israel onward from the Sea of Suf, and they went out to the Shur Desert, the Shur Desert. And after traveling 3 days in the desert, they found no water. And they arrived at Marah, but they couldn't drink the water there because it was bitter. This is why it was called Marah. And the people grumbled against Moshe and said, what are we to drink? And Moshe cried to Yah, and Yah showed him a certain piece of wood, which he threw in the water, and it made the water taste good. And then Yah made these laws and rules of life for them, and there he tested them. So think about first what is going on here. It sounds a little weird that he threw a stick in the water, and the water was bitter, and now all of a sudden it becomes sweet. And then he says, what's the connection? Because he says he's going to make these laws for them. Actually, it's the a hook and what was it? In a mishpat is the word, 2 words in Hebrew, but it says, a lot of times it says a statute and an ordinance. And how are they? What's the connection between that, the waters becoming sweet, and a statute and an ordinance, and about them being tested? Well, we think about first, this goes back to what's he throwing into the water? A tree, a stick, an etz. Well, if we go back to the very beginning, in the garden, we had 2 trees. One was the tree of life. And, you got life from eating of that tree. But if you ate from the other tree, it brought death. And so the tree of life, again, is a picture of, the Torah. Proverbs talks about, it gives us life. And trees are also a picture of people. In Psalms 1, he talks about blessed is the man, who doesn't walk in the counsel of the wicked, and that, or sit in the ways of the scornful, but his delight is in the Torah, and that on the Torah does he meditate day and night, and he is like a tree planted by the streams of living water. And that not only that's going to bring forth fruit in its season, and its leaves will not wither, and whatever he does will prosper. So a person is likened to a tree. And so we know too that Yeshua is the tree of life. And so now we see they come to this place where there's water, and the water is a picture of the word, and the word is become bitter. And the waters that are bitter need to be sweetened. And how were they made sweet? By the tree of life, which is the Torah and the Messiah. So Moshe is basically, he's showing them, I'm bringing forth, giving you water here, and this is what I'm doing. But he's also teaching them in a picture that the water, the word, if it becomes bitter, if people have put all the stuff in it and it's made it bitter, how you sweeten it is you go back to the Torah. You go back to the word and you test it. And this has become a statute and an ordinance for them as a test. And that, so here he's showing them that Yah can not only provide for their basic needs of water, but at the very same time, he's showing them and talking to them about the benefits of obedience. Okay. Now, let's keep going. Verse 26. And he said, if you will listen intently to the voice of Yah, your Elohim, and do what he considers is right, pay attention to his mitzvot and observe his laws, I will not afflict you with any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, because I am Yadeh Vaveh, your healer. And they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees encamped there by the water. And they traveled from Elim, and the whole community of the people of Israel arrived at the Sin Desert between Elim and Sinai on the 15th day of the 2nd month after leaving Egypt. Okay, so, here, this is all happening within a month of them leaving Egypt. So all this, now, if you think about he brought the children of Israel to Elim, and Elim is an oasis. And they camp there because there's springs of water. Remember where they are. They're in the Middle East. They're in, basically Saudi Arabia. You've got, and they've got 12 springs and 70 palm trees. And, so think about, Yah is teaching them using the pictures and things around them. Not only, I'm going to meet your basic need, but I'm also going to show you something else. And so Yah was teaching them at Mara, but he also showed them a teaching picture here at Elim, because the 12 springs of water, think about 12 tribes. Yes.
And each tribe camp in their certain spot. So each one would have a well of their
own. Right. Yeah. Each one has a well of their own. They're each in their certain spot. Mm-hmm. In Psalms 92 and verse 12, it says, the righteous one flourishes like a palm tree, and he grows like a cedar in Lebanon. And then we see in Deuteronomy 32 and verse 8, I'm just going to read these verses. Deuteronomy 32:8, it says, when the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, he separated the sons of Adam and set the boundaries of the people according to the children of Israel. And how did he set those boundaries by the children of Israel? How many of them? Genesis 46 and 27. And the sons of Joseph were born to him in Mitzrayim, and were 2 beings. And all of the beings of the sons of Yaakov, which Yaakov is Israel, who went to Mitzrayim, were 70. So 70 is a picture of the nations of the world. And the nations of the world, is a picture of that number 70, sorry. And so we got these 70 palm trees here. That's a picture of 70 nations. So these 12 tribes are to do what? They are to present the living word, the Torah, the water, in spirit and in truth to the nations. So these 12 tribes are to supply this water to the nations. They're to be this living stream that, is still flowing out of us today, trying to give water to the nations. And the water that comes from them, is to bring healing for the nations. In Revelation 22 in verse 2, we see that it talks about the tree. It says, between the main street and the river was the tree of life, and it produced 12 kinds of fruit, and a different kind every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. So just like what we are supposed to be doing, we're supposed to be bringing forth his word to the nations, which in turn, his word is to produce life and healing. And, it's a picture of us. When we return to, Torah and walk in his ways, that water should be flowing out of us, nourishing others. Okay. I read 16:1, 16:2, and all the congregation of the children of Israel grumbled against Moshe in the wilderness and Aaron in the wilderness. So here we are again. The children of Israel, they're between Elim and Sinai. Left Egypt. They're not at their destination yet. They're in that in-between place. And they're doing what? They're grumbling. I mean, how many of us are the same way? That, we're in that in-between place and we're grumbling. We get frustrated. Okay. That's, I mean, a lot of times people judge them very harshly, but, when you really think about it, we're no different. We do the same thing. Yeah. I mean, we're doing the exact same.
I hear you.
How many of us each day, we think about where we are and we're, we might be hurting or in pain and we, why am I having, God, why is my shoulder hurting like this? Or, and we're grumbling about it. Mm-hmm. Instead of saying, okay, y'all.
But we didn't see the miracle.
Well, I mean, but still, we are seeing. But he says that we're greater than they are because you believe and you don't have those miracles. So, yeah, and so that's why he's saying. Mm-hmm. Yep. He did. He ran from Jezebel. Yep. Even he's talking about Elijah. He saw all that happen, and Yah bring down fire, and he ran from Jezebel and hid in the cave. So, and Yah said to Moshe, "Here I will cause bread to rain down from heaven for you. The people are to go out and gather a day's ration every day. By this I will test whether or not you observe my Torah." And so, yeah, okay. And then verse 5, on the 6th day, when you prepare what they brought in, it will turn out to be twice as much as they gather on the other days. So, and think about this too, Yah is basically saying, okay, I'm going to provide this bread for you, but you got to go get it every day. Yeah, but still, I'm providing bread for you. You got to go get it every day. You can't go get it today for the whole week. You got to go get it every single day, which comes back to what's the bread? Your word. You can't just get it on one day and have it for all week. You got to be getting it every single day. That's, is trying to show us a picture that, a lot of people will go, well, I only go to church on Sunday or I only go for this one service. Well, that ain't going to last you the whole day. Here's the perfect example. He said, you got to go get it every, but on that 6th day, I'm going to give you a double portion, enough to get one.
And too, it's not like today's, they just listen to a pastor up there in the pulpit. Mm-hmm. They don't pick up a Bible.
They don't read it for themselves. Yeah,
they just, and I don't even know if they even take them to church with them.
Yeah, a lot of them don't. Yeah, well, some have them on their phones now, but still. Yeah. The word on the phone. So now think about in John chapter 6 and verse 33, it says, for God's bread is the one who comes down out of heaven and gives life to the world. And they said to him, sir, give us this bread from now on. And Yeshua answered them and said, I'm the bread which is life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever trusts in me will never again be thirsty. And then he also says, I told you, and you have seen, but you still don't trust or believe. Everyone the Father gives me will come to me, and whoever comes to me will I certainly not turn away. For I've come down out of heaven, not to do my own will, but to the will of one who sent me. So, again, Yeshua, is the bread of life. So Yah gives the children of Israel a test here. He says, okay, this bread is not only to feed you, but this test is also going to see if you walk in my ways or not. And, the sages believe to see if, is this a test? Are you willing to truly depend on Yah every day for your needs? For, because really, like we said earlier, that word sabab means to turn around your mentality. And the children of Israel still had a slave mentality. And now they're going to have to switch their mentality and realize who their master truly is. And not only that, but, there's a link with manna. If we go to Revelation chapter 2, because this manna, remember, is actually manhu. Okay. And Revelation 2 and verse 17, it says, for those who have ears, let them hear what the Spirit is saying to the Messianic communities. To him winning the victory, I will give some of the hidden manna. I will also give him a white stone on which is written a new name that nobody knows except the one receiving it. And so, you think about what exactly is this hidden manna? What is this hidden manna? And if we go back to Exodus chapter 16, if we skip down to verse 32, look at what Moshe said. Moshe said, here is what Yah has ordered. Let 2 quarts of manna be kept through all of your generations so that they will be able to see the bread I fed you with in the desert, which I brought you out of Egypt. And Moshe said to Aaron, take a jar and put 2 quarts of manna and set it aside before Yah to be kept through all of your generations. Just as Yah ordered Moshe, Aaron set it aside before the testimony to be kept. I mean, can you imagine that, think about the manna is, was put there before the ark, and kept there, and, and so it was considered hidden because it was preserved for future generations. Well, and I know I heard different people say, well, how in the world? Because, if you go back up, it said that if they gathered too much, or if you then try to keep it for the next day, what would happen to it? It's going to rot. So how were they going to be able to keep this manna for future generations? Well, where are they keeping it? And where the ark is, what is the ark? The presence of Yah. So his presence is life. It's life. It sustains it. It's keeping it, for future generations. And it was considered unseen because who's the only person that's allowed to go in there to the holy place? It's the high priest. It's only the high priest. None of the other priests could get in there. So it was considered to be hidden manna that, that they're referencing there. So, and then, like I said, the chapter, it goes on through to chapter 17. Verse 16 is the last part, but I just wanted to go ahead and stop there just for the sake of time. But just to think about that, how amazing some of these events would have been. And imagine that not only that, it is not only for what happened at that time, but it's going to be happening again because there's going to be a second Exodus. And how does this come to play? How is this going to work out? And are we going to see the miracles that are occurring? Or are we going to be like some of them and still complain and say, oh, I don't really,
Well, you always
we're all going to have complaints because not everybody that comes out gets into the promised land. But it's amazing, how he aligns his word with what's happening in current events. And to think about that. So that's what we have today on Beishalach. Hopefully you got something new in there and got a little better picture of them coming out, but, and how the path that they took, coming out of the land. So you ready?
Amen.
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 You got any questions, any comments or anything that you want to ask? Or if you think something later, you can text us or email us.
Let us know.
Good lesson. That was a great
Truly.
lesson.
Thank you, Lisa.
Hope you enjoyed that. And it's something when you think about the end times and think about what it's showing a picture, even the gospel of today and all what's happening. So, man, I tell you, things, and I've always said in the end times, things are going to go real fast. We think of, in a twinkling of an eye or something's going to happen. It's going to, before we know it, when something happens in history, it just one day we're walking around doing what our thing working, then the next day, bam, something happened. We was just, sitting there just going by our daily routine and 2 planes fell out of the sky. And then, all these other things, I mean, just things happen. And especially in God's time, it goes bam, it happens real quick.
And one thing I wanted to say too is to think back at the beginning of the parsha, as I mentioned, that how 2 people can experience the same thing. And one, it's a pleasure, something good for them, and one, it's a plague, something bad for them.
Yeah.
And so as these events come along, it depends on where you are.
Yeah.
Are you really walking his word and in his commands? Because he says, how do you know, how do I know that you love me? Is you follow my commands. And so that's how we know that. I mean, and it's not a thing of fear for us, but it is a thing of we are surrounded and protected then. And, how much more so that we really need to make sure that we are aligning our life and making sure that we are walking in his ways. So.
Amen. If everybody wants to get ready, we'll bless the congregation. I got sinuses. My sinuses are, so y'all, kind of bear with me with my sinuses. Yeverekaka Yahaba Verishme Reha Yahava Yahava Penava Ileka Behuneka Yesal Yahava Pinaveleka Vayishim Beka Shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face to shine on you and show you his favor. May Yahweh lift up his face towards you and give you peace. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, Sar Shalom. Go in peace. Amen.